What if the most dangerous idea in the music industry right now isn't a song, an artist, or even a streaming platform? What if it's a single clause in a contract? A clause that the three most powerful entertainment companies on Earth have spent decades making sure artists never ever get. Master recording ownership. In 2024, a Thai woman who grew up in Buriram, a province most people outside Thailand couldn't find on a map, walked out of one of the most powerful entertainment systems ever built. And instead of signing with another label that would own her voice, her music, and her future, she built her own company from scratch. That company is called LLOUD. And the business structure behind it is so disruptive that it's quietly rewriting the rules of how artists can operate at the highest level of the global music industry. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what LLOUD is doing, why it works, and why the executives at YG Entertainment, HYBE, and Sony Music's label division are watching it very, very carefully. Before we go deep, let me give you 3 things this video is going to prove. First, there is a model baked into the K-pop industry, a system that turns human artists into corporate assets, and it has gone largely unchallenged for 30 years. Until now. Second, the deal Lisa struck between LLOUD and RCA Records is not a traditional record deal. It is something fundamentally different, and the distinction is worth tens of millions of dollars over the course of a career. Third, the proof that this model works is already sitting on the charts, on the Coachella stage, and on the Academy Awards stage, and most people watching it had no idea they were watching a business revolution happen in real time. If that sounds like content worth your next 15 minutes, and trust me, it is, consider subscribing. This channel covers the business strategies behind the artists, companies, and movements that are reshaping entire industries. You won't find this analysis anywhere else. But before we get to the mechanics of the genius, we need to understand the machine it was built to escape. And here's the question I want you to hold in your mind as we get started. If an artist is the one generating the fame, the streams, the sold-out shows, who should own what they create? We'll come back to that. But the answer might make you angrier than you expect. Chapter 1. The problem everyone else is ignoring. To understand what LLOUD is doing, you first have to understand what K-pop actually is at its core. Not the music, not the choreography, not the fashion, the business model. Here is how the traditional K-pop system works. A label, let's say YG Entertainment, or HYBE, or S&M, identifies a trainee, sometimes as young as 12 or 13. They invest years and enormous sums of money developing that person. Singing lessons, dance training, language coaching, brand development, styling, housing, meals, all of it. Then, when that trainee is ready to debut, they sign a contract. And that contract, historically, gives the agency almost everything. The recordings, the stage name, the image rights, the earnings, minus deductions for training costs that the artist now technically owes back to the label. These contracts can run 7 years. They have been called, by Korean courts and international media alike, slave contracts. That term is extreme, but the power imbalance is not. When you stream a K-pop song, you are almost certainly not generating royalties for the artist singing it. You are generating revenue for the company that owns the master recording, which, in nearly every case, is the agency. The artists? They receive a percentage of what's left, after costs, after the label takes its cut. Now, here's the part the industry hoped nobody would ever run the math on. When BLACKPINK broke global streaming records, and they broke a lot of them, when Money became the first K-pop solo track to hit 1 billion streams on Spotify, when Lisa set the record for most viewed music video in 2004 hours by a solo artist. Who owned those recordings? YG Entertainment did. Lisa created it. Lisa performed it. Lisa's face, voice, and artistry drove billions of streams. But the asset, the master recording, sat on a corporate balance sheet that had nothing to do with her. This is the problem everyone in the K-pop industry has accepted as normal. It is the water these artists swim in. And for 30 years, nobody at the elite level had figured out how to change it and come out the other side bigger than before. Until Lisa did. Chapter 2. The birth of LLOUD's strategy. Lisa Manabal, known the world over simply as Lisa, joined YG Entertainment from Thailand at age 14. By the time BLACKPINK debuted in 2016, she was the only non-Korean member of the group, navigating a foreign country, a foreign language, and one of the most demanding entertainment systems on Earth. What happened next is well documented. BLACKPINK became one of the best-selling girl groups in music history. Lisa specifically became a global phenomenon, accumulating 104 million Instagram followers, 3 Guinness World Records, and the title of most subscribed K-pop solo artist on YouTube. She was, by any metric, one of the most valuable artists on Earth. And she owned none of her music. In December 2023, BLACKPINK renewed their group contract with YG Entertainment. But here is the detail that changed everything. The 4 members, Lisa, Jennie, Rose, and Jisoo, did not renew their individual solo contracts. They separated the group from the individual. And that distinction is a masterclass in strategic leverage. By keeping the BLACKPINK brand intact, which protects the label's core asset and avoids a catastrophic public rupture, Lisa was simultaneously free to operate as a solo artist under entirely different terms. Now, here is where Lisa's thinking diverges from what every other artist in her position has done. The conventional move, the safe move, would have been to sign with a major label. Universal, Warner, Sony. Collect a large advance. Let the label own your recordings. Let them market you. Cash the royalty check. That is what the industry expected. Instead, on February 8, 2024, Lisa posted a single announcement to her 100 million Instagram followers. She wasn't announcing an album. She wasn't announcing a tour. She was announcing a company. Introducing LLOUD, she wrote. A platform to showcase my vision in music and entertainment. Join me on this exciting journey to push through new boundaries together. LLOUD, her label, her management company, her creative entity, 100% owned by her. Now, here's the open loop I promised you at the start. If Lisa owned the label, but needed the distribution muscle of a major player to actually release music globally, how exactly was she going to make that work without giving up what she'd just fought to keep? The answer to that question is the actual genius, and we'll get there. But first, let me tell you what this looked like from the industry's perspective. When a global superstar with 100 million followers announces she's forming her own label, instead of signing with you, you don't applaud. You watch very carefully. Because if it works, every artist watching will want the same thing. This was the moment the music industry started paying very close attention to Lisa. Chapter 3. The mechanics of the strategy, the core. Let's break down exactly what LLOUD did. Because the structure here is elegant, and it is replicable. 2 months after launching LLOUD, Lisa announced a partnership with RCA Records, a label under Sony Music, home to artists like SZA, Doja Cat, and Tate McRae. On the surface, it looked like a normal signing. Pop star joins major label. Business as usual. It was not. The key phrase in the official announcement was this: Lisa would retain full ownership of all her recordings. Read that again. Full ownership of all recordings. Let me give you an analogy to make this crystal clear. Imagine you write a novel, a brilliant novel, and instead of selling it to a publishing house, which would own the copyright and pay you a percentage, you self-publish it, keep the copyright yourself, and simply hire the publishing house's distribution network to get your book into every bookstore in the world. You pay them a fee. They move the product, but the book? It's yours. The rights? Yours. The future film deal, the audio rights, the international editions? All yours. That is what LLOUD did. LLOUD is the publisher. RCA is the distributor. And the asset, the master recordings, stays on LLOUD's balance sheet. In music industry terms, this is called a licensing deal, or a distribution partnership, as opposed to a traditional record deal. The difference is not semantic. It is financial. It is generational. When Taylor Swift discovered that her first 6 albums had been sold by her former manager to a company she despised, Scooter Braun's Ithaca Holdings, the internet exploded. She spent years re-recording her entire catalog just to own a new version of her own music. Lisa structured her deal so that conversation never needs to happen for her. Now, why does this terrify the industry? Think about what the K-pop agency model depends on. It depends on the idea that artists need the agency. They need the training infrastructure, the marketing, the global connections, the deals. The artist is valuable, yes, but the agency is indispensable. LLOUD just proved that is false. A sufficiently large artist, one who has already been built, already has the audience, already has the brand, does not need to sign anything over to anyone. They can own the label, partner with distribution, and keep the wealth they generate. And here is why that sends shockwaves through the entire system. YG Entertainment, HYBE, S&M, JYP, their valuations are not just based on current revenue. They are based on their catalog, their master recordings, their intellectual property. Every time an artist leaves and takes their future catalog with them into their own entity, that is value that doesn't accrue to the agency's balance sheet. And the agents, the executives, the shareholders, they are watching LLOUD's model succeed in real time. They know that every other major K-pop artist watching this is doing the math. If you are still watching this video, you now know more about the economics of this deal than 99% of the people who have streamed Lisa's music. What you just learned is the difference between an artist and an entrepreneur. Lisa chose to be both. But knowing the strategy is one thing, the proof is another. And that's exactly where we're going next. Chapter 4, The Proof, Evidence and Market Reaction. A genius business strategy that fails commercially isn't genius. It's a cautionary tale. So let's look at what actually happened after Lisa launched LLOUD and executed this model. On June 2007, 2024, Lisa released Rockstar, her first solo single under LLOUD and RCA Records. It was produced by Ryan Tedder, the Grammy-winning songwriter behind hits for Beyoncé, Taylor Swift, and Adele. The results were immediate. Rockstar debuted at #1 on the Billboard Global excluding US chart. It hit #4 on the Billboard Global 200. It charted in more than 20 markets worldwide and accumulated hundreds of millions of streams. This was the first single released under the LLOUD model. And every stream of that song, every chart position, every licensing deal that flows from it, that value lives on LLOUD's books, not a label's. Then came New Woman, a collaboration with Grammy-winning Spanish artist Rosalía, released in August 2024. The partnership with Rosalía is not incidental. It signals exactly who Lisa's team is now able to attract as an equal creative partner, not as a signed artist going through her label's gatekeepers. New Woman won Best Collaboration at the 2024 MTV European Music Awards. Lisa became the first K-pop artist to win in that category. But here's where the real proof lives. And this is where we close the first loop I planted at the beginning of this video. On February 28, 2025, Lisa released Alter Ego, her debut full-length solo album, released via LLOUD Company and RCA Records. The album debuted at #7 on the US Billboard 200. It hit #1 on the top album sales chart, selling 28,000 copies in its first week. 3 singles from the album charted on the Billboard Hot 100. But the cultural moments around the album are what really tell the story. On March 2, 2025, Lisa performed at the 97th Academy Awards, making her the first K-pop artist to ever perform at the Oscars. In April 2025, she headlined the Sahara stage at Coachella, one of the most prestigious festival slots in global music. The industry reaction? Instructive. YG Entertainment's public statements about BLACKPINK's members in the period following the split were carefully measured. Competitor agencies began quietly exploring what artist partnership models might look like on their rosters. HYBE, which had already expanded into Western markets and Latin music, accelerated its own diversification, in part because the threat of top talent forming independent vehicles is real and growing. And here's why that second loop matters to you even if you've never bought a music album in your life. The traditional record label model isn't just a music industry problem. It's a template. The we own your output, we pay you a percentage model exists in publishing, in sports, in gaming, in Hollywood. It is the default structure of creative employment everywhere. What LLOUD demonstrated is that a single creator, with the right leverage and the right structure, can flip that relationship entirely. Own the output. Hire the infrastructure. Keep the asset. That is a lesson that echoes far beyond music. Chapter 5. What happens next? Implications and opportunities. Here's the uncomfortable question the K-pop industry now has to answer. If Lisa can do it, an artist who entered the system at 14 with no leverage, in a foreign country, speaking a language not her own, what happens when the next generation of K-pop superstars decides they want the same deal? The answer is, the agencies know exactly what happens. And they don't like it. The LLOUD model is a template. And templates, once proven, get copied. Think about what Taylor Swift's Fearless re-recording did. It didn't just create a new version of an album. It created a playbook that every future artist can point to and say, this is how you fight back. And it forced every major label to think harder about what artist-friendly terms actually look like. LLOUD is that kind of inflection point. But it's not reactive. It's proactive. Lisa didn't wait until she was wronged. She built the structure before the problem could occur. Who follows Lisa? Potentially everyone. Jennie of BLACKPINK launched her own label, OA, Odd Atelier, and released music under a similar artist-controlled model. Rose signed with Atlantic Records while retaining significant creative autonomy. Jisoo formed her own agency, BLACKPINK. The BLACKPINK exodus from the traditional K-pop contract structure is not an accident. It is a coordinated individual set of decisions that collectively signal a paradigm shift. And now, let's talk about what this means for you. If you work in a creative field, music, film, writing, gaming, design, pay attention to this next part. Because what LLOUD demonstrated is a roadmap that applies beyond entertainment. Here are the 3 principles at the core of the model. Principle 1. Build leverage before you need it. Lisa didn't leave YG and immediately form LLOUD from a position of desperation. She had a decade of recorded global success. She had 100 million followers. She had proven demand for her output. She built her audience inside the system, then used that audience as leverage to exit the system on her own terms. Lesson: before you negotiate for ownership, make sure you are indispensable. Principle 2. Separate the asset from the infrastructure. The genius of the LLOUD RCA deal is that it unbundles what most people assume must stay bundled. The label owns the masters and provides distribution and handles marketing. LLOUD said, keep the masters, lease the rest. You don't need to own the infrastructure you use. You just need to own what you produce. Lesson: don't sell the asset to pay for the service. Principle 3. Move first, move publicly, and make it irreversible. By announcing LLOUD publicly to 100 million followers before any deal was signed, Lisa made her independence the story. Any label that subsequently tried to negotiate for ownership would have been doing so in full view of the entire industry and her entire fan base. The public announcement was itself a negotiating move. Lesson: transparency is leverage. Why does understanding this now matter? Because the creator economy is still in its first decade. The defaults, YouTube's revenue split, Spotify's royalty structure, label deals, publisher agreements, are all still being negotiated at scale. The artists, developers, writers, and designers who understand ownership economics right now are the ones who will build catalogs, not just careers. The LLOUD model is not a K-pop story. It's a roadmap for the next generation of anyone who creates something for a living. The industry is terrified of LLOUD not because of what Lisa did. They're terrified because of what it shows everyone else is possible. In 2024, Lisa walked into one of the most control-obsessed industries in global entertainment. She didn't fight the machine. She didn't sue the machine. She didn't write angry social media posts about the machine. She built a better one. LLOUD is what happens when an artist stops asking permission and starts building infrastructure. It's what happens when the leverage is yours, the audience is yours, and you finally understand that the most valuable thing you create isn't the music. It's the ownership of the music. That is the genius business strategy the industry is terrified of. Not a sound, not a song, not a star. A structure. A simple, elegant, replicable structure that says, I own what I make, I hire who I need, and I keep the asset. If that idea changes how you think about your own work, your own output, your own creativity, then this video did exactly what it was supposed to do. The conversation about who owns creative work is just getting started, and the next video in this series goes even deeper into how the K-pop agency model is now scrambling to restructure, what HYBE's internal strategy reveals, and why the next 5 years will either reinforce or permanently shatter the old system. That video is already on this channel. Watch it next. Because if this story surprised you, the next one will change your perspective entirely. And before you go, one final question to sit with. If you created something that the entire world wanted, and you could either own it or sell it for a guaranteed salary, which would you choose? Most people answer that question wrong, until they see what's possible.